Suge Knight is one of the biggest hypocrites I've ever met throughout this whole entire story as it relates back to either Tupac or Biggie's murder. I mean, nobody lies more than Suge Knight. And so I take everything that he has with a grain of salt. Most of what he says is pure speculation. It's just based on stories he's heard and just hearsay.
I walk in redemption.
Hey everyone, welcome to another Sit Down with Michael Franzese. Hope everybody is doing well. All is very good, very blessed on this end. As always, I give all the praise, honor, glory, and thanksgiving to our God for that because he deserves it all. Hope everybody is doing well. Hope you enjoyed the Suge Knight interview from his prison cell and getting a lot of comments about it. And, a lot of people understand Suge, some people don't. But hey, you know what? We try to sit down and we give people an opportunity to talk. And I think Suge was very forthright in this interview. And before I go any further, I have a very interesting guest today. I'm going to tell you who it is. But for those of you that want to be part of the community, michaelfranzese.com/family. We have people joining daily. And believe me, people, you're going to enjoy it. We put a lot of resources in there. If you want more of me, that's the place to go. We're doing Zoom calls. I'm putting resources and courses in there. We're going to have private meetings. We're doing Q&As. We got a lot of stuff going on. We even got a Bible study going on. So michaelfranzese.com. It's $10 a month. I tell you right up front, it's not going to break the bank because we want everybody to be involved. We just cover expenses on it. And I hope you really enjoy it because people are benefiting by it. You want to know about negotiation. You want to know about business. You want to know about faith issues, personal issues, leadership. We talk about it all, not only myself, but other experts that we're going to be bringing into the platform. I'm very excited about it. We're creating a community. We have a new beginning now, for the next 4 years. I'm not going to get into the politics now, but I think there's going to be some changes. We've got to get back to community and family people. We got to be one. We got to be unified here in the United States, and we're going to be trying to do that. We're going to be doing that in this platform. So michaelfranzese.com/family. Jump on board. I guarantee you're not going to regret it. Today I have a very interesting guest. His name is Greg Kading, and I prepared a bio on him. He's the investigator who connects the dots between the Tupac and Biggie murder. I know this goes way back, but there's more to it. But a very interesting guy. I prepared this bio. I want to read it for you. Greg Kading stands as one of law enforcement's most notable figures in hip-hop history. As the former LAPD detective, who led the Special Task Force investigating both Tupac and Biggie's murders, Kading's work has become increasingly relevant to current investigations involving Sean Diddy Combs. I don't know how much of that he can talk about. There's an ongoing investigation, but we'll sit down with him and see what he has to say. His methodical investigation style and ability to secure crucial witness statements, particularly from key figure Keffy D, and Keffy D, for you don't know, Dwayne Keffy D, he's the person that recently was arrested and said that he was paid $1 million by Puff Daddy at the time, P Diddy now, to kill Tupac. That's what he said. It's being investigated. I'm not saying it's true yet. I don't know if he's been charged with that, but that's what he claims. So we'll see how that works out. He's established himself, Greg has, as an authoritative voice on the interconnected web of 1990s hip-hop power structures. This story never seems to go away. The story with Tupac and Biggie and Suge Knight. We spoke to Suge Knight recently. After retiring from the LAPD, Kading authored Murder Rap. That was his book. Great book, by the way. You got to read it. And participated in several documentaries sharing his findings publicly. His investigation techniques and evidence-gathering methods continue to influence current cases, including recent developments involving Bad Boy Entertainment's founder, P. Diddy. I don't know how much Greg may know about the PD investigation now, but I think he's going to give us an honest assessment of that, whatever he does know and whatever he can reveal. Remember, it's an ongoing investigation. He'll talk about. But really, he knows that I interviewed Suge Knight. We'll see what he has to say about that. And we'll see what he has to say about the character, the personality of Diddy, who he's investigated thoroughly. So we'll get some insight into all of that. And this story in this case is going to go on. It's very fascinating. We don't know what Diddy's going to do. Is he going to cooperate at some point? Are there other people involved? You heard some of the allegations that Suge Knight made about people involved with Diddy at the time. Who knows? This is all a matter of talk right now. It's being investigated. Hopefully, the truth will come out. I'm sure a lot of things will be hidden. We don't know. And a lot's going to depend upon what Diddy does. Is he going to sit down and cooperate? Is he going to give up other names that were involved? Are there other names that were really involved? Who knows? It's an ongoing investigation. We'll see. But I think Greg is a good guy to give us insight into this whole matter. So without any further delay, here's my guest, Greg Kading. Really a pleasure to have you sit down with me. I've been looking forward to this. You're obviously a wealth of knowledge about a case and some people that are certainly in the news as of late. And I look forward to speaking with you.
Likewise, Mike. Great to be here with you too, man. Thanks for having me on your platform. And I'm learning as we go too. So every day seems to be a new revelation with some of these characters out there that we're going to talk about.
Yeah, and before I got to ask you this, Greg. You're out here in Los Angeles. Have you ever investigated any of my old acquaintances or old associates, I would say?
No, nobody from any kind of, traditional mob background. I've done some racketeering cases in Los Angeles, some RICO cases in Los Angeles, but nothing with like the traditional mob or, any type of extension of the Italian mob. Never, that always seemed to be a little bit more East Coast type of activity.
Well, without demeaning anybody out here, or maybe doesn't matter. We used to, from back east, we used to call the LA guys the Mickey Mouse mob. So
I have to tell you though, this guy right down the street from me, his name's Dave Bonanno, and he's got this picture of him and his uncle in the garage, and he's I guess a descendant or an extension of the Bonanno family. And so he often tells me about some of the shenanigans that his uncle was involved in out here in California.
well, that's interesting. Yeah, they had a presence here. Obviously, after they were asked to leave New York, I'll put it politely, they took up spot there in Phoenix, but they did have some influence here.
Yeah.
Those are the good old bad days, Greg.
Good old bad days.
So listen, I want to obviously, the Tupac Shakur and Biggie case was, huge, huge news at one time. And I've seen you on some other podcasts, and you have very masterfully laid out, the investigation and what part you played in it. You were the lead investigator. So I'm not going to get into all of that because I think people know about that. I'm really interested in Diddy and your perspective on him and all the stuff that's going on with him now. I mean, Greg, one of the things, it's amazing to me. And again, my position on all of this is always you're innocent until proven guilty. There's a lot of stuff out there. Obviously, it's somebody like yourself that weeds through everything and gets to the bottom of it and hopefully the truth with all these investigations. But there is a lot out there, and where there is smoke, there is some fire. And knowing Diddy the way you do from your investigation, what is your feeling about all this that's coming out now? Because it's so hard for me to understand how something like this, if it's true, and all this stuff that Diddy is involved in, how it can go on for 20 years. It's we couldn't get away with things like that for 20 years, but how something like that can go on for 20 years is really beyond me. Maybe you could give me some insight. So many of you know I've been in the wine business now for just over 2 years, and I'm happy to report that we've been very successful. People are accepting our wine, not only all over the United States, but all over the world. We're getting, people that want to have our wine in various countries, very rewarding. And our wines are from Armenia, the ancient vineyards, first vineyards in the new civilization. We're introducing it into the United States, been very successful in that. We have a couple of different categories. Our Irani is our #1 seller, terrific, you're gonna love it. We also have a pomegranate wine that you won't find anywhere else. And now we've just introduced non-alcoholic wines, and it's off the charts. People are loving that. If you don't drink wine and you want to participate with everybody that does, ours tastes so good. People are really enjoying it. I recommend it. So if I were you, I would go right now to our website, franzesewine.com. It'll tell you where you can buy it. We're in 9 or 10 different states now, soon to blanket the entire country. I know you're going to enjoy it. So thank you all for supporting us, those of you that are enjoying it. We always say it's a sip you can't refuse, and I guarantee if you try it,
you're going to see that I'm right.
My perceptions have changed slightly, gradually over time. Today, I look at Diddy with through a different lens than I might have 10, 15 years ago. There were obviously some early red flags, but it's a complicated thing because we have to be very careful about falsely accusing people or even, you know, um, making accusations based on nothing more than speculation. And we just haven't seen all the evidence. So I prefer to kind of withhold judgment on some things. I can tell you regarding Diddy back when Tupac Shakur and Biggie Smalls were murdered. He wasn't exactly cooperative. He didn't do what you would assume a friend or a manager, so to speak, would do. So from a law enforcement perspective, he was very unhelpful in an area where he ought to have been contributing towards getting some type of justice in those two murder cases. But as we found out in time, he was complicit in one of them, and which would make sense why maybe he didn't cooperate in the other, because the two were, they were just, we always understood that they were somehow interconnected. And so if you're going to cooperate or provide information on one and you're culpable in the other, one thing could lead back to the next. And that's where I think he understood his own vulnerability.
It's interesting because recently I did an interview with Suge Knight from prison, and he made the allegation that Diddy's been an informant for 20 years.
Yeah, everything that Suge says ought to be taken with a grain of salt. I mean, nobody lies more than Suge Knight. Suge Knight is one of the biggest hypocrites I've ever met throughout this whole entire story as it relates back to either Tupac or Biggie's murder. And so I take everything that he has with a grain of salt. Most of what he says is pure speculation. It's just based on stories he's heard and just hearsay and all of that. And again, we kind of, as Christian men, ought to be careful about falsely accusing people, because even when those things turn out to be untrue, the damage is already done just by, you can't unring a bell of an accusation, even when you're proven innocent later. And so I think that we just have to be really careful about acquiescing with people who base all of the information on gossip, innuendo, and speculation like Suge does. I looked at everything regarding Diddy all the way back throughout the 90s. One of the last things our task force did in Los Angeles was went out to New York, met with a DEA agent named Eric Henderson, who was spearheading the investigation into Bad Boy Records. And they let us go through their files with a fine-toothed comb. And I looked through every single piece of paper that they had regarding their investigation of Bad Boy Records, and I did not see a single thing that would suggest that Puffy was ever an informant. Not a single thing. And that would have been in there. This was all confidential DEA and government documentation, and there would have been something in there. And we didn't. And furthermore, the most obvious is if he was an informant, then he would have been providing information on the cases that we had approached him on.
That makes sense.
Right.
Yeah, what do you think about this? I don't know if it's new evidence, but with Dwayne Davis, making the allegation that Diddy paid him $1 million, to put the hit on Tupac. You find any credence with that?
I do. When he first told us that back in late 2008, early 2009, everything else he told us, we were able to substantiate. And so that lends credence to anything that, furthermore that he says. And when he told us about the solicitation for Tupac's murder, it made sense within the context of the ongoing rivalry that was taking place between Puffy and Suge, Biggie and Tupac, and the gangs that they were affiliating with. So there's already a well-established history. And so once he tells us that, Puffy was scared to death, he knew he had a target on his back. Every time he came to LA, Suge's goons were, trying to track him down. They had kidnapped somebody in furtherance of trying to find out where Puffy's mother and family lived. So all of this led to support or substantiate the claims that Keith Davis was making about Puffy's solicitation. Originally, I thought that the solicitation was somewhat just an expression of exaggeration. Like, man, these motherfuckers are breathing down my back. They, they want me dead. When they go and he gives us this explanation of the solicitation, I thought that perhaps Puffy was just really desperate and afraid. He's like, man, I'll give you whatever you want to take care of these guys. I just don't want to have to come into LA and, look over my shoulder. So I thought it was that. But as things unraveled in the last decade, I'm seeing a completely different character and nature of Puffy that I didn't take into consideration at that time. Now I see maybe he's capable of doing something as direct and intentional as what Keefe D was saying happened.
Well, I have some contacts in the industry, and going way back, they said that Puffy really wasn't involved in he wasn't a gangster at that time. He wasn't involved in any gangs. He was really a music guy. And then somehow this feud between him and Suge started, and that's when he started to kind of take on security and the guise of this gangster rap stuff. But initially, that wasn't him. He was a guy that just wanted to create music. And going back, do you have insight as to how this rivalry really began?
There's a couple different versions of how it all began. Originally, everybody was somewhat friendly with one another, and then the two labels, one from the East Coast, one from the West Coast, Bad Boy and Death Row, they began to want to encroach on each other's territory. Bad Boy wanted to open up a Bad Boy West out here in LA, Suge's backyard. Death Row wanted to open Death Row East, in New York, which is Puffy's backyard. And so slowly and surely the animosities began. But it wasn't until an individual named Jake Robles, who was a bodyguard of Suge's, a close friend of Suge's, was shot and killed by an associate of Puffy Combs's in Atlanta outside of a nightclub. As soon as Puffy's bodyguard shot and killed Suge's bodyguard, now blood was on the ground. Now it's an actual feud where there's nowhere to go but, towards retaliation.
So that's where it started then. Two bodyguards shot at one another.
One shot and killed the other.
Oh, okay, I got it. And that was back in Atlanta?
That was in Atlanta. And this was what? It's 1995, I believe it was.
And then Tupac was shortly after that, and then Biggie shortly after that, within a year or two.
Yeah, Tupac killed in September of 96 and Biggie killed in March of 97. But there was all kinds of other drama and hostility and gunplay that had taken place in between those individual events.
Well, Greg, let me ask you this. This is interesting. In investigating these rappers and all this gangster rap, they certainly had a different mentality than I did and my former associates back in the day. They seem to want to be known and want to be seen and want to, display the fact that they were part of a gang. Where on the other hand, most of us, maybe you could look at John Gotti as an exception, guys that were so high profile. We tried to stay out of the limelight. That's not something that we thought was good for us. But they had a whole different way of carrying themselves. Did you see that? Over the past 25 years, I've had the chance to meet personally with thousands of people, speak to millions, between my in-person appearances and online. And the one consistent thing over the years, it's funny, when I open it up for a Q&A, you would think that people would ask me mob questions. I get a couple of those, but really it's all personal. Just, Michael, how did you overcome the challenges you were in? How did you do all that time in solitary? How did your wife relate to you, your kids when you got back home? How did it interfere or how did it help your business? Just so many things that have been asked, and I've been able to mentor to these people over the years. Over the past 2 or 3 years, it's become a lot more intense. People are coming to me more and more and more with challenges and obstacles in their life that they're trying to overcome. And most often, people want to be part of a community. They want to be part of a family. They look back, Michael, how was it when you had this family, around you of like-minded people? And truthfully, that's what I miss about my former life. It's not all the other stuff, but it's just the camaraderie we had with the guys, and it's just so powerful. And so I am,
really motivated now to create this community, this family where like-minded people can get together. They can share some of their experiences. They can get advice. They can get mentorship from people that have been there, done that have overcome challenges and obstacles, that, have a way to survive and really prosper in their lives. And we're creating that platform. And this platform, people, it's not me being there in name only. I want to get down with the people. I enjoy that. I'm a people person. I love giving advice. So we're going to have, Zoom calls on a regular basis. We've created programs that we're going to be able to share with you. We're going to have meetings where we all get together and enjoy some Franzese wine maybe, and sit down and have some slices pizza or whatever we'll do, and really get together and get down with one another and be a benefit to one another. There's nothing like community and family. There's nothing like it. If that's something of interest in you, if you want a part of me that you'll really get, and the team that I've created that I know you're going to enjoy, I think you're going to want to be part of it. And I know it's going to benefit you. There's no question about that. It will be a benefit. And we've made this in such a way that anybody can be involved in it, because that's what we want. We don't want, the elite persons out there, that maybe don't think they need something. We want everybody, and we don't exclude anybody. So, and I think when you jump on this link, you're going to see exactly what I'm talking about.
Yes, of course. The gangs in Los Angeles, and particularly within the context of these groups that we're talking about specifically here, they didn't have the type of organization and sophistication that you guys had. These were street gangs, and they kind of flew by the seat of their pants. There was really no code of honor. There was really nothing other than, hey, we grew up around each other. We've got each other's backs. We're all just trying to survive, but there wasn't really structure to it. And so I think that's a big difference when people try to compare what a street gang might be to what, an organized crime organization would look like.
And in your investigation, I mean, were you able to turn a lot of people, flip a lot of people, create a lot of informants?
Absolutely. Everybody, we say this all the time, everybody has a number, and you get them pressed up against a wall, and there's a number that they aren't willing to do insofar as a prison term. And when they need to wiggle themselves out of it, more often than not, they do by providing information to the law enforcement.
And let me ask you this, Greg, regardless of, and this is something I learned, regardless of, all of the advancements in technology and video surveillance and everything, most of these cases don't survive without witnesses, without informants. Would you find that to be true?
Absolutely. Yeah. Informants are still one of our strongest tools.
And let me ask you this: in all of this, talk that's going on, all these allegations being made about Diddy, do you see him acting in the way they're portraying him now? Because obviously he's denying everything. There's been lawsuits filed against him, and some of the stuff is pretty bad what they're saying. But do you see him as that type of character? Number one, and number two, do you have any insight into this? I know you're out of that right now, but I'm sure you still have your hand in the the flies on the wall, so to speak.
Yeah, it's really interesting, and it's an interesting time. Much of the behavior that we are accusing him of, for lack of a better term, these kind of bacchanalia type of parties, this goes back to antiquity. Aside from pride, sexual misconduct's like this, one of the devil's greatest tools, right? And we see people getting compromised via that all the time. So I don't know, the parties, the freak offs, whatever. Hey, behind closed doors, if everybody's consenting adults. Now, if it goes beyond that, where there's crimes being committed, where people are being coerced, blackmailed, taken advantage of, or they're underage, well, now that's a different conversation. And I think it's important to kind of separate the two instead of putting them all into one thing, like, hey, these massive sex parties. Well, let's individualize this. Who's really a victim? And then go from there. So I think that, and also, Mike, we're rewriting much of what is and isn't socially acceptable. 10, 15 years ago, flying prostitutes in from another state to go to a party and attend to the men in that party, we didn't think of that as sex trafficking. We thought that was just prostitution. And that's what we considered it, kind of like a victimless crime. We don't look at it that way anymore. Now we look at these willing participants who are making financial gain, we still look at them now as victims.
Hmm.
And I'm not saying one's right, one's wrong. I'm just saying we're rewriting some of the definitions of what is and what isn't criminal, or what is and what isn't socially acceptable.
Hmm. Now, has the law changed with respect to the way these people are viewed now, or is it basically the same statutes as the same law?
It's just a reinterpretation of law. And so it has changed in that sense that, again, using that example of flying prostitutes from Las Vegas to New York, say, and having them conduct, sex for money. Yeah, it's a crime, but nobody really considered that sex trafficking. Now that's a buzzword in which everybody is, for good reason, very much against. But we're reinterpreting what these things actually are and how they should be perceived through law enforcement.
And what's your view? Yeah, it does. What's your view on that? How do you view it personally?
I personally, if prostitution obviously is the oldest profession to mankind, and if it's consenting, willing adults, I don't look at it necessarily as this crime that needs to be addressed with all of the fervor that we are now. However, if people are being taken advantage of, if they're being, they're vulnerable people that are being enticed with drugs or through blackmail or through coercion, then yeah, that has to be addressed. People shouldn't be able to use power against other people. Um, in that sense, I guess. I'm not sure. I haven't really thought that out very well. But I think there's an overemphasis on some of these things that we didn't used to consider, major crimes.
Let me ask you this. What do you think of the situation in LA now with these progressive, well, we had a progressive district attorney. He'll be gone, from what I understand. He lost the election. What do you think about the situation, Greg, not only in LA, but in most of these, blue state cities, these sanctuary cities? What's your feeling on them now?
I think they get what they ask for. If they want to have these liberal, progressive lawmakers and crime goes through the roof and nobody's being held accountable for their criminal activities, then the community suffers. The communities are victimized. And in time, they realize that this isn't working, and then they try to recover from it, which is exactly what Los Angeles and other blue cities are trying to do now, is address this rampant crime problem that soft on crime policies has created.
Well, we know it's certainly not the fault of the LAPD and all these other, police departments around the country that have been, handcuffed in a way. I mean, listen, Greg, I'm from the street, and people have asked me, "Oh, Michael, you must be happy, or you would have been happy." I said, "Yeah, back in the day, I might have been happy. If obviously if law enforcement was softer on crime when I was on the street." But being a practical person and being a father and a husband and a grandfather, I always said, listen, when my kids walk down the street, I expect the police to protect them. I'm not looking to be soft on crime that way. We want our communities protected. We want our neighborhoods protected. And I just can't understand this mentality, the whole defund the police mentality, the whole soft on crime, being able to walk into businesses and steal $950 worth of goods and walk out with no prosecution, really no consequences. I don't know how we ever got to that point, but I know it's certainly not law enforcement's intent to have it that way. It's all these progressive DAs and politicians that are creating it. It's just insanity. Hopefully, we see a reverse of that now.
Yeah, I hope so too, as nobody should have to live in fear, especially within the confines of their own neighborhood. Um, it's obviously a complicated problem because you get into socioeconomic issues and those things, but the soft on crime policies have proven just to fail over and over again. And I think that's why we saw things go the way they went during this last election. I think people are just fed up, and they've been fed a lot of bullshit, and have found out a little too late that it doesn't taste very good.
Yeah, I think we're seeing that. This was a certainly was a red wave, but let's not even call it that. Let's call it people coming to their senses and saying we had enough. I think that's the wave that they've shown. Let me ask you this. I know you're feeling on Suge. At least I got a little glimpse of it, but he named a lot of people. A lot of people. I'm going to throw it out there. He said Obama was involved with Diddy. Obviously we know Justin Bieber. He hasn't fully disclosed what went on there, but obviously there was some things that were pretty distasteful. I think we're seeing that. What do you think of Obama? He said there's a long time relationship between Diddy and Obama, and he was involved in some of these freak offs. And well, he didn't say that. Don't let me misquote him. But he did say there's a relationship between Diddy and Obama.
Right. Well, we can, again, this goes back to, do we declare people guilty just by association with no pure evidence? They could be good friends, but it doesn't mean that one's guilty of the other one's misdeeds.
Mm-hmm.
But we have to be just really careful, even though I have personal feelings about President Obama. I'm very cautious not to even suggest that he was involved in anything with Diddy insofar as what Diddy's currently being investigated for. So I would just refrain from suggesting anything. I don't know. I think that if there's going to be this revelation of people who were directly involved with Diddy, I think Diddy's actually at the top. I don't think that there's upward mobility in the culpability of the people around him. It might go a little bit sideways, but mostly it's going to go beneath him. He's going to have been the guy on top with the power, the influence to be able to take advantage of people. I don't think it's going to go upwards. I think that, because he's a celebrity, you're going to rub shoulders with other celebrities.
Let me ask you, obviously, if something is sensitive, of course you won't answer, but has law enforcement asked you to come into this investigation at all with Diddy because of all your past knowledge?
Not so much with Diddy. Again, my personal involvement as investigator into Diddy had to do with the murder of Tupac Shakur, and to some degree, the murder of Biggie Smalls. Insofar as his involvement in any kind of sexual misconduct, we never looked at him for that. It was never something that we were spending a large amount of time investigating. That's the only thing I'm doing is helping the current investigator with the P Diddy case, and also helping the family of Tupac Shakur with their potential civil case if they decide to go after Puffy Combs about his solicitation of Tupac Shakur, the solicitation of the murder of Tupac Shakur. I'm helping them to the extent that I can, and then I'm helping with the trial that Keefe is facing next March. But it's limited to that. I don't really have much to say insofar as Diddy's current dilemma.
Didn't you investigate some goings on with Diddy in Miami also?
No, not so much. No, not really. I didn't have anything to do with any of his Miami investigations. Everything that I had, again, was kind of focused just on these two murders that we were trying to solve. I didn't have much to do with any of his other activities.
No. Let me ask you, how do you think this is all going to turn out, just from an outside perspective looking in with Diddy?
He's going to come to a realization that he needs to put all of his cards on the table and see what kind of hand he can play. He's going to, obviously going to have to fall on the sword about anything that he did that was criminal, where they have plenty of evidence to convict him should he go to trial. And he'll probably try to work out some type of. But again, there potentially is a lot more smoke than there is fire here. We'll find out in time. But I think that Diddy's legal advice from his lawyers is going to be, hey, anything that you can do to assist the government to bring their entire investigation to a conclusion, you ought to do. And I think he will do that. It's really only his only option.
You know, it's interesting what you said. If he's at the top, and everything is beneath him, well, it's at least from my experience with the feds, you know, then he's the guy.
Yeah.
You know, he's the guy that they really want. I mean, if he's able to give up anybody lesser than that, if they really want to get to the bottom of the investigation and anybody that really was culpable here, if they want to put that all together, then I guess they will deal with him. If not, you know, my past experience, he wouldn't be able to deal his way out of this.
You're right. And other than to the extent that he would be seen as cooperating, that he would be giving his full cooperation, it may not be implicating other people where they'd be using his information as evidence against others, but just mere cooperation, just being willing to sit down with the investigators and say, listen, ask me anything. I'll tell you honestly what I know to assist you. That does have, that does have some value, some self-serving value.
Mhm.
And that would be taken in consideration from the prosecutors and potentially a judge, just by the mere fact that you're cooperating and not making things more difficult for the government than they need to be. So there is some value there.
Yeah, let me ask you this. You know, it seems that the catalyst to bring this all about was that video that they saw of him, you know, beating his girlfriend up in the hotel room, and that seemed to spark this whole investigation after 20 years of allegedly this going on. Do you think that was it? I mean, or was this known, or did they have, you know, some idea that this kind of activity was going on and just let it go, or didn't bother to look into it until that video came out?
Yeah, I think that the video most definitely was the catalyst to open the door towards looking much more closely at him. Everybody saw within that video what Sean Combs was capable of. And so I think now everybody's reconsidering, like, wow, this guy just seemed to be a really, hardworking producer. He's out there, he's making a lot of money, he's doing all these things, he's great for hip hop, it's great for this, and then and now this happens, and people are like reconsidering, like, whoa, hold on, what are we dealing with here? And even for me, I'm like, well, I already knew that he was a very uncooperative guy. He did nothing to solve Biggie's murder and do anything to help us in our investigation, but he's not necessarily obligated to do that. Now we see him beating the hell out of this girl, and it just gives you a different sense of what he's made of, what kind of human being we're dealing with here. And I love the fact that Suge kind of disses everything that Suge says bad about Diddy, Suge does.
Yeah.
Suge beats women, right? He's been arrested for it, beat a girl in Las Vegas in broad daylight. And so, Suge, I love how hypocritical he is. Everything that he comes on and pretends to be somewhat of a saint, or that all these other people do all these horrible, things. There's nobody out there that's worse than Suge. He's a master manipulator. He's got bodies under his belt. He most definitely is directly responsible for the murder of Christopher Wallace, Biggie Smalls. And you had mentioned in, a little bit of empathetically that, hey, Suge Knight should get a second chance. Maybe Suge Knight should be given. No, I would disagree with you, Mike, and here's why. We don't get forgiven unless we first seek forgiveness, right? And
Yeah.
Suge Knight's never done that. He's never got on his knees and asked Valletta Wallace for forgiveness for the murder of her son, which he caused. And so until the day comes, and to her, to her credit, she has told me directly in person, I would extend my hand of forgiveness to the person that was responsible for the murder of my son. All they need to do is come to me and ask for it.
Wow.
Suge Knight has never taken the responsibility for the things he's done. And so I can't, well, it's not my place to forgive him, obviously. And so until he seeks, until he has a repentant heart and is willing to go to those that he's trespassed against and plead for forgiveness, and I think he's right where he should be.
Well, listen, Greg, I appreciate your insight on this. I mean, I don't know Suge. I've had one conversation with him. I'm always kind of want to give people a second chance, but obviously, you're a lot more familiar with him than I am. So I understand where you're coming from. I want to switch gears 1 minute. You have anything to do or any knowledge at all at the Menendez Brothers case?
No, not at all. I've watched a documentary recently. I don't know any of the investigators that worked on it. So no, I know about as much about it as you might. It's a fascinating case. Did they just get reprieve? Were they given?
No, well, what happened, Gascon, he reviewed the case and made a recommendation to the judge that they should be resentenced to life with parole. And if the judge resentences them because they were minors or they were under 26 when they got convicted and sentenced, then they could be up for parole. The parole board can review it and decide whether to give them parole or not. They've already done that amount of time if they do get resentenced, so they could be eligible immediately. But now Gascon is out, the new DA is in. I'm assuming he's going to want to review that recommendation and maybe rescind it or say, no, I think they should do all their time. There's a lot of controversy. The reason I have interest, I did 11 months in LA County Jail with Lyle Menendez.
Oh, no kidding.
Yeah, I was there. We were both in lockdown. We were in SHU, and he, told me of the abuse of his father. So people asked me about it. I said, listen, the only thing I know is what he told me during that time we were in there. And to me, honestly, Greg, he was believable. I believed what he told me. I think there was some mitigating factors there. Obviously, the murder was pretty heinous the way it came about, but it's not for me to decide. I would hope they did get a second chance because they've been model inmates, from what I understand. They were very young when this happened. But some people disagree with that. We'll see what the court says when it comes up for the hearing. I think it's in December.
Yeah, that's actually really interesting. If what they say is true about the abuse and all of that, then yeah, you're right. It's mitigating and ought to be reconsidered maybe through that lens.
Yeah, I think, life with parole, and then, they had to convince the parole board and everybody else that they've reformed while they were in there. And like I said, they've been model prisoners. Both of them were married while they're in there. And one of them has a daughter, the younger one. So, I'm pulling for them, but we'll see what happens. Just thought you might be have some insight into that case at all. It was interesting.
Yeah, no, I haven't. Before we leave, I want to tell you though, I really, really appreciate the segment that you did on The Mafia is Not Dead. I was listening to that whole segment this morning. I thought it was fantastic. I love the way you blended together all of the associations of different people. It's irrefutable that there's very dark conspiracy that takes place behind closed doors. I'm going to have to get your book now because I guess you better explain it or more thoroughly explain it in your book. So I'm looking forward to reading that, but I really, really enjoyed that segment, Mike.
Well, I appreciate that. And all you do, you just send me your address and I'll send you a copy of the book. It'd be my pleasure. Gray, how did you work with the FBI, with the federal, agency? Did you ever, of course you came across them. Were they easy to work with? Because I've always heard conflicting stories about that. It's funny. I've made so many friends with people in law enforcement. There's a crazy dynamic out there. Some of the people that were after me are now friends of mine now. We just see things through a different lens when we get out of the lifestyle that we were in. And it's really nice to know that some people looked at you, even during the time they were investigating you. Hey, this may not be a bad guy. He's doing bad things and we're going to do our job. He's breaking the law. We're going to go after him, but it's not a personal thing. And I was really pleasantly surprised with some of the people that were on the investigative team with me that, had really nice things to say about me afterwards and me about them.
I'll tell you one of the things that that comes to mind. I built some great relationships that went beyond the professional relationship of investigator and the defendant. And I can think of a half a dozen people right now who I became friends with, and we stayed in touch through prison, through their years in prison and writing letters back and forth. And when they got out, we kind of reunited and had lunch and built some really good relationships with some people. And it didn't always have to be this position of um, uh, I don't know if I don't know how to say it other than, it wasn't my job to judge. That's the court's job. I just bring evidence forward and let them do what they have to do with it. But I've always been understanding that life takes people down different paths. And sometimes we all make bad decisions and there's consequences to pay. And I never wanted to be the type of person that alienated myself as some type of self-righteous individual just because I happen to be on the quote unquote right side of the law. And I built great relationships. And I'm not surprised to hear that some of the people that you interacted with in the feds spoke highly of you. And you probably have some good things to say about them, um, even though your objectives were initially different.
They were different. We always said, we always took the position, hey, we're on one side of the law and you're on the other side, and you have to do your job. And if you do your job better than we do ours, and we get arrested and go to jail, then no hard feelings. All we ever said was, don't frame us. Don't harass our families and don't frame us. And we understand. And we really did. Most of us had that mentality. I can tell you that. We really did. So, very surprising to me, after 30 years, I sat down with Rudy Giuliani on a radio show, and Rudy had indicted me. And in the courtroom, the day of my arraignment, it was $1 million bail. He came up to me and my lawyer, and he said, Franzese, if I convict you on this case, I'm giving you double what your father got. And my father was doing 50 years. And I said, Rudy, bring it on. I said, I beat you guys 4 times already. Let's go for round 5, right? So, that was the feeling between the two of us. Fortunately, I got acquitted in that case, or I probably wouldn't be speaking to you now. But when we met 30 years later, he said, Michael, I've been watching you for the last 30 years, and I'm really rooting for you. I think, your transformation is genuine. I believe you really are a Christian, and I'm really happy for you. And it kind of surprised me when he said that. But it really made me realize something. We really are, we may be taking different paths in life, but we're really all one people. And, it's best to try to get along. And if you're on an opposing side, that's just the way it is. But there doesn't have to be hatred and animosity between you.
Absolutely. Yeah. It doesn't need to be personal at
Yeah.
all. Regarding working with the FBI, that was that was a double-edged sword. I love the resources that they bring to bear. Oftentimes the only way we're successful in some of these investigations is because of the resources that the feds would give us. And I worked with some great agents too. More often than not, the best FBI agents were guys that were previously municipal police or local police. And then they went on to become federal agents because they just seemed to understand the streets and some of the nuances of criminal investigations more than, say, some guy who was an accountant or a banker who became an FBI agent and really didn't have an appreciation for, what it was like to investigate street activities. So, but they were great as far as the resources. Often the agents were cool to work with. Sometimes they weren't. A lot of them had a little bit of a self-righteous type of attitude. But all in all, I liked working with the feds. I spent most of my career in task forces working with them, and had built some great relationships with a lot of different agents.
That's good to hear. Yeah, I spoke to some of detectives that said this exactly the same thing. Sometimes, you meet an agent that's a little bit elitist because they're a Fed, and but most of the time you work pretty well together,
Yeah.
which is okay. Let me ask you, what's your hopes for the city of LA now, and really for all of California? As far as law enforcement and the way things are going now. What's your perspective? What do you hope to see, at least in these next 4 years? We got a different sheriff in town in the White House.
Well, I hope that we go back to allowing the cops to go out and do their jobs without fear of, reprisal every time they turn around. Listen, you work in an environment that is hostile and it's violent. And so there's going to be, it's inevitable that there's going to be altercations. And, you can't talk everybody down. And more often than not, these days, the cops are criticized for everything that happens that
Right.
that doesn't look good on video, because nobody really understands the context prior or what the whole picture suggests. So I just hope that we get back to a place where we support law enforcement. Obviously, we need to hold them accountable when they fuck up,
Mm-hmm.
but understanding we don't need to always um, uh, judge the whole on the misdeeds of a few.
And Greg, let me ask you, did you see within the department at that time, was there much racial bias? Because I think it's so played up, it's so overplayed, just because a person of color, gets arrested or whatever happens. You know what I told people that say something to me, Michael, what do you think the way police treated this guy? I said, let me tell you something. I said, whenever I was arrested, and I was arrested 18 times in my life, when the police would come up to me and they say, you're under arrest, I put my hands out, they put the handcuffs on, I get in the car, and we go through the system. I said, we don't try to run, we don't try to fight back, we don't try to do anything. You're asking for trouble when you do something like that. If you're just under arrest and you have to go and deal with it, the way the system allows you to deal with it, that's it. And I think a lot of times these people bring on their own problem by the way they either resist or whatever, but it's looked at is that there's racial bias, you're coming after that. Now I'm sure there's some of that exists, but I think they're isolated incidents. That's how I view it.
I would agree with you wholeheartedly. They're very, very isolated incidents and very, very few and far between, both internally. I didn't matter to me if I was working with a female, Hispanic, a black guy, a gay man. It didn't matter who my partner was. Let's just go out and have some fun and watch each other's back. And that was the general, environment that we worked in interpersonally. We didn't have that. And then out on the streets, we didn't care if you're breaking the law. We didn't see anything other than the behavior. Didn't matter if you're black, Hispanic, or anything else. And being a white guy, I didn't care. Didn't matter. And, I worked in a predominantly black and Hispanic neighborhood almost all of my career. And so it's unavoidable that 99% of the people that I encounter are going to be of a minority nature,
Mm-hmm.
And so it was just the nature of working in a place where there's different demographics. And I never, I would say probably, and I maybe knew two true racist cops among the thousands that I worked with.
Mm.
And they weren't both white.
Wow. Well, that's eye opening. But my opinion of this is that this is politically driven. I think the politicians, instead of trying to calm this down, they fuel the fire even more of racism when an incident like that occurs. Instead of coming out and speaking, hey, this is an isolated incident, this is not how it is, they immediately attack the police and it's a racist police department and we have to have reform, we got to do all this, defund the police. I really think it's politically motivated. They're the ones that fuel the fire for this. If they would take a different position and calm people down, I don't think we would have had the issues that we've had. And we had obviously some bad ones, going back.
I think that's been the Soros media's agenda, is to sow discord and to sow chaos, because it's easier to control a population that's under duress as opposed to one that's unified. And so as long as you create the division and the chaos and the confusion and the mistrust, it's easier to control that populace. And I think that's always been the deepest agenda.
No, you're absolutely right. We just recently, I know Trump came out with, he put his I think the former head of ICE is going to be in charge of the deportations. And you already had someone in mainstream media saying, doesn't matter, even if you have a green card and they're coming after everybody. If you're brown, you're gone. And already starting to fuel that fire, getting people nervous, getting people scared. And this is what happens. All of this is from the media and it's politically motivated. And I just hope we can rid ourselves of all of these type of people that just want to see problems. They just want to see things explode.
It's so interesting, that the levels to it. Obviously, we're told that, our true struggle is that spiritual struggle, the principalities and dominions and what's behind the physical realm. When you go back and where is this all going? That's why I think that, the power of prayer and the power of a unified body of believers can have a huge impact. The ones that they can't control, I would have thought that the left, the Democrats, probably thought that they had this whole thing wrapped up,
Mhm.
and then out of nowhere they're shocked. And I think it's because things were taking place behind the spiritual doors that they couldn't control. And now everyone's like, what's going on? And I really truly believe it goes back to, God is the ruler maker. God anoints the kings and he displaces the kings and the rulers. And he's always playing the long game. And so if we accept that Trump was God's chosen, then we have to also accept that Biden was God's chosen. But it's for a bigger and longer game than any of us can ever imagine or appreciate.
That was well said, Greg. I really, my wife said something similar to that. Maybe the Biden administration had to really show us how far out of whack this was going to make people realize that we need a total reset. And I think she was right, and I think your perspective on that is right also.
I can tell you're a gentleman and just really a decent guy, and I appreciate that. And thank you for sitting down. I really mean that.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me. Prayers out for you and your family and for everything that you're doing. You've got a fan here in your corner.
Well, there you have it, people. And I got to tell you, it was a bonus for me, really, to hear Greg speak about his faith, about our faith, and give us somewhat of an honest assessment where he things are right now. And listen, maybe it's something that I don't do enough on YouTube, but anytime I have a guest on that's willing to share his faith, like Greg just did, I'm very willing to accommodate because, listen, I wouldn't be here if it wasn't for God having a different plan and a purpose in my life. Jesus Christ is not only my Savior, He's my hero. I love putting it out there every opportunity that I get. And Greg gave us that opportunity, and I appreciate that very much. Fascinating guy. You know what? You can tell when you sit down with somebody, he's just a real class act, a man with integrity. I love the way he presented himself. He didn't go overboard. I love what he said. For him, it's a job. He has to investigate, criminal activity. Wherever it leads him, it leads him. I love what he had to say about, racism in the police department. I think it's overblown in many cases. Most of this is just isolated incidents. And I think Greg, a man of integrity, just said that and proved that. And, it starts at the top. It's the media that fuels these fires. It's politics that fuels these fires because they look for people to support them in that regard. Instead of trying to unite and calm things down, what do? They try to incite things. They should get into the communities and let them understand these are isolated incidents. And yes, there are areas where we need reform in the police department and in every other, agency in life. That's just the way it is. But we have to stop this thing that there's rampant racism in this country. I don't believe that to be true. And I know I'm going to get some blowback on this. I always do, but I don't believe it to be true. And Greg is a guy with no axe to grind. He's just telling it like it is. I think his insight into, the character of Diddy was very interesting to me. He's not condemning him right off the bat. And I think he's of the opinion now, through his experience, let's see how this all, shakes out. Let's see where the evidence leads us. Hopefully it's going to be an honest and upright investigation. We're going to get to the truth of the matter, and people that should be held accountable will be held accountable. But, Greg was terrific. I really appreciate sitting down with him. And, I just saw the honesty within him as he revealed all of this. And by the way, I didn't get into all the, details of the case because Greg has laid that out in other podcasts. Many of you listening might have heard that already. I know Patrick Bet-David did a great job with Greg. He was great, very methodical in telling you how the investigation went about. That wasn't my purpose today. I really wanted to hear more about Diddy and what insight he might have to him, since that case is current, ongoing, and we're going to hear about it for the next several months at least, maybe longer than that, as the case gets into a trial possibly, or maybe Diddy will prevent that. We don't know. Anyhow, it was great. Greg, I really appreciated and wanted a copy of my book. He'll get that. I'm going to get a copy of his Murder Rap. Brilliant. I have read it. I'm going to get a copy and give it out to other people. I think it's a book that should be read. It gives some good insight. And that's it. So hopefully we provided you with another very interesting guest. And that's it for today. So my friends, how do I always leave you? Same way. Never going to change. Be safe. And I think the country is going to be a lot safer right now. I really mean that. A lot safer. Be healthy. I think it's going to be a lot more healthy. RFK, he's going to have a great position. He's going to get all this junk out of our foods. People, we need to be healthy. Trump is surrounding himself with the right people. Elon Musk, RFK, Tulsi Gabbard, Vivek Ramaswamy. These are all great people of integrity and character, and they're very capable. He's going to put them in the right positions, people. I'm not just ranting. I'm telling you, this is how I really feel. This country needs a reset, and I think Donald Trump is going to provide that and all this great staff that he has around him. So be safe, be healthy. I really do mean this. Hopefully you really took to heart what Greg had to say. God bless each and every one of you. God bless your families, your loved ones, your community, your neighborhood. And yes, God bless America. Take care. I'll see you next time.